everybody, welcome back to the ADHD Women's Palooza. I'm so glad you have joined us, and I know that might be a new term for you. So we're going to just delve into unknown territory today with Pasha, and I'll introduce you to her in just a moment. I'm Linda Rogley. I co-founded the ADHD Women's Palooza way back there in 2016, and so I was counting on my fingers how many years this is. I thought, oh, it's 8 years. Actually, it's our 9th year that we are doing the Palooza. Next year will be our 10-year anniversary. And I just have to say that every year we attract a brand new cohort of experts that provide cutting edge information, most importantly, accurate information, because a lot of my guests will talk about the fact that there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there on the internet. We won't mention any names like TikTok, but we will, of course, pretend that we know who that is. Let me just mention a couple of things. I actually also founded the AD Diva Network, which is for ADHD women 40 and better, as I like to call us, because we are much better as we get older, and we're good when we're young too. Don't get me wrong. Obviously the ADHD Women's Palooza. We have done the Parents Palooza for several years, not doing that anymore, but we are going to have the ADHD Couples Palooza in the fall. So if you're part of a couple, you might want to join us for that as well. That aside, a couple of things before we jump in and talk to Pasha. Number one, you know that this is free. You signed up free. You didn't have to put your credit card in. We don't need any of that information because we are trying to provide information. We're not trying to get it from you. We're trying to send it out. So if any of the things that you hear today or in any of the sessions apply to you and to anyone you know, please send them the link. Everybody can have access to it for 27 hours. It used to be 24 because and Janine said, do I have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning? I said, no, let's get up at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I gave her a little extra sleep. It also gives you some extra time too, which is sometimes difficult if you're working all day or if you're in a different time zone, because we have people in Australia where it's tomorrow already. And we have people in Europe and that side of the world as well, even though we're based in the United States. You can, of course, buy all of the sessions if you want to. I don't even remember how many we ended up with, almost 30, I think. And that's a pretty good bargain for only $97. Inflation has not hit the ADHD Palooza. We are at the same price we have been for 9 years, I'm happy to say. And also, we always include a live session on Saturday. That was one of my requirements for even creating the Palooza, is that we need a place for women to talk to each other and also to ask questions of some of our experts, because we're just here kind of broadcasting to you, and we don't have any time for feedback. So that's an opportunity from noon to 4 on Saturday. That's Eastern time here in the United States. So you can look into that on the web. You'll get information about it. I don't need to talk about this. What I need to talk about is Pasha. I'm so excited. She has never been with us on the Palooza, and yet we have been missing each other a lot. It's like, oh, I got this email, and then I finally connected with her in person. So I got to see this wonderful woman in person, and she said, what about Palooza? And I said, you bet Palooza. So let me tell you a little bit about who she is. She has a lifetime of lived experience, she says, and 30 years of professional experience as a marriage and family therapist. And she also is a neurodivergent coach. She specializes in, I'm going to say this very slowly so I don't mess it up, intergenerational leadership, all right, through the lens of mental health, neurodiversity, inclusion, which we're also talking about this week, and neuroqueering, which may or may not be a new term to you, and we'll talk about that in a moment. She coaches neurodivergent individuals and couples, and she also speaks to schools and organizations and ERGs about neurodiversity affirming practices. So in other words, we're making it easy for us to be neurodivergent in all kinds of settings, right? She also works with disability inclusion, whether you see it or whether you don't see it, frankly, neurobelonging, psychological safety, I want to hear what that's about, and burnout, which we all know what that is. She encourages leaders with privilege and power to embrace the concept of intersectionality. She uses a lot of words in her bio, just so you know, and allow all, especially those with marginalized identities, to be heard, respected, and elevated. And to me, that is the essence of what every person with ADHD desires, whether they recognize it or not. Sometimes it's just, I just got to get through the day. But what we really need is for someone out there to understand what's going on with this and say, good, I can respect that. I honor that in you. So Pasha, welcome. We're so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much. I've been a Palooza fan for years, and I'm grateful for your generosity every year you present this. So I'm so glad to be.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so let's talk about what neuronormativity is, and then we mentioned the word neuroqueering. So bring this all together. Let's do some definitions first, so that we set this table for everything we're going to talk about.
Sure. So neuronormativity is neuronormative standards or just society's standards of what is deemed, a lot of air quotes here, as normal or the right way to
Yeah.
think or learn or act or feel. And these standards are not always ones that neurodivergent people relate to. So neuronormativity is something that I often unpack when I talk to neurodivergent people who just feel like they've either never really felt a sense of belonging or acceptance in the world, or they struggle at school or at home or at work, and they wonder why. And it's often because of the neuronormative standards that are set by society.
So another term for that would be neurotypical, correct? Is that
Yeah,
typical?
it's like neuronormativity is based on neurotypical standards.
Okay, got it. Okay, just making sure that, because the neuronormativity is a new term for me, but I just want people to intersect it with something that they may have heard before. So when we talk about neuronormal, I'm just going to drop the ivity on there. This is hard for me to say, but if we're talking about neuronormal standards, which are, as you say, many times difficult for us to achieve, even though we dang well keep trying, it's just like beating your head against that brick wall behind you. Um, so tell us a little bit about what neuroqueering is and how that intersects, because a lot of people go, I'm not neuroqueering, but there are lots of people who are. So tell us,
Absolutely.
please.
And the good news is, or the exciting thing for me, is that neuroqueering is not about being neurodivergent and queer. Like, definitely it can be considered an identity. A neuroqueer individual is anyone whose identity, gender performance, or neurotype has been shaped by their engagement in practices of neuroqueering, which is
Ah,
which is challenging neuronormativity.
yeah.
So anybody can challenge neuronormativity. Anybody can, like, sometimes I'll neuroqueer education, neuroqueer relationships, neuroqueer corporations. So how can we look at it through the lens of neurodiversity, look at it through the lens of neuronormativity? So it's not just about the intersection of neurodivergence and queerness. Often use it as an identity, but also it's a verb, like neuroqueering as a verb versus
Got it.
neuroqueer as an individual.
Okay, all right. So, all right. Let's back up a minute, because I'm old, and in my day, it was an insult to call somebody queer. So
Yes.
what has happened to that word? It seems like it's become more inclusive. So can you say a little bit more about that? Because it's like, oh no, that would be a bad thing. People
Yeah,
used to use it as an insult, right?
absolutely. And many people still don't want to identify with the queer identity. In LGBTQIA plus, the Q still stands for queer for most people.
Yeah.
But anybody, I mean, I highly value agency and autonomy, and people should identify however they wish. We should honor their identity. But for a lot of people, even including me, I use queer because for me it is a fluid term that allows me to expand beyond my heteronormative and cisnormative life that I don't any longer relate to. And so sometimes people use queer as just not completely straight, but there's so many variations of how people interpret it. But it has been reclaimed by the LGBTQIA plus community as not being an insult. Sometimes for older generations, it still feels like an insult because it was used as such long
Yes,
ago. And
absolutely.
it's starting to shift. But again, it's not, I'm not speaking for all queer people that that's a term you should use. It's a term that I use and many people use.
But it's acceptable, is what you're really saying.
Yeah.
And what I'm really hearing is it really means a difference, right? It's a difference from what has been set as a norm, by whomever, society, culture, whatever. And that probably varies from one culture to another, to be honest with you.
Yeah, this is why I think it's all intertwined because
Yeah.
neuronormativity and heteronormativity and cisnormativity are
Yeah.
intertwined with many social and gender norms. So I feel like what happens often for a lot of people, neurodivergent people in particular, is we start to unravel, like a fierce unraveling of these norms. And when we're positioned to diverge from neuronormativity with our ADHD or autism, whatever our neurotype is, we tend to also start to think about other norms that are out there that don't resonate. Like, who made up these terms as to what is ordered or what is normal? And when we start to unravel that, lots follows.
Of course it does. Of course it does. And now if we could only get those normative people to understand that, and that's one of our challenges, right? So I don't want to go there yet. I want to go with there is a language of neurodiversity, because now what we've, like, for instance, we used to call people who were on the spectrum, you could say that you have autism or you were Asperger's. Now we've decided Asperger's is not such a great term because of the person who was named after. I won't go into all of that, but things change. So what is some of the language that should be in our vocabulary? I know that was a should, that we can invite people to use. There was a coaching word for you. That would be appropriate and not shaming and not derogatory of either them or us. So can you give us some of those terms?
Yes, and I love that you asked that, because I think words matter, and I talk a lot about inclusive language. One of the things I see that's maybe the most frustrating is that people will say a neurodiverse individual, or they'll say neurodivergent equals autism, or they'll say neurodiversity is ADHD, autism, dyslexia. It's like neurodiversity, where the entire human species is diverse, right?
Yeah,
We're
right.
all diverse as humans, right? But some of us diverge. So that's neurodivergent, which is not a bad word. There's no value, statement about that. It's not wrong, bad, broken, to be fixed or anything. And so sometimes I hear people say, I don't want to use neurodivergent because it sounds pathologizing or stigmatizing. So I'd rather say neurodiverse, but it's not accurate. You can't have a neurodiverse individual. So an individual can be neurodivergent. So that's one thing. The other thing is, a lot of companies right now are creating neurodiversity hiring practices, which in and of itself sounds awesome. Great, they're including neurodivergent people. However, when you dig a little deeper, often their misinterpretation shows, because what they're really meaning is an autistic hiring program, because they aren't expanding the neurodivergent umbrella beyond autism or even learning differences. And so then it's not inclusive. Then we're not including everybody under the neurodivergent umbrella, which goes, of course, far beyond ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and such. So I find that sometimes places that are thinking they're inclusive are actually exclusive.
Wow. But they're trying. I mean, at least they're trying. I do want to give them half credit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's great. Neurodiversity affirming practices in the workplace is awesome that they're trying that. But my work is to go in and explain to them how to make it accurate and inclusive, because I think that's their intention, but there's a lot of misunderstanding.
Well, and I think that, and I'm just making this up because I'm not sure about this, but my guess is that companies, any size company, large or small, believes that when we talk about neurodivergence, then we are talking about, oh, I have to do ADA accommodations, and I have to have all these things set up. And it's not like putting in a wheelchair ramp. It's like these things, as you said in your bio, some of these things are apparent and some of these things are not so apparent. We talk about ADHD being an invisible disability, and it is. There's ableness and there's disableness, and we're kind of on the spectrum of that as well, depending on how our own ADHD plays out in the world or how we've learned to accommodate it. So back to companies, I think, are fearful that this is going to cost them money. It's going to cost them productivity. It's going to raise havoc in the workplace with other people, blah, blah, blah. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's completely the opposite though. So most accommodations for apparent or non-apparent disabilities, for the people who do identify as disabled, cost $500 or less.
Wow.
In terms of the business case for this. Also, if you are offering accommodations, maybe that's a longer break, a quiet room, flexible schedule, remote work, I can go on and on.
Yeah.
You creating somebody who's going to, work more efficiently, feel more accepted, safer, more collaborative, more innovative, able to problem solve, able to think more clearly, more loyal. Like you're literally creating a culture of inclusivity and belonging where people want to be and want to stay. So you're going to retain them, support them, and elevate them, not just hire them.
Yeah. That's hugely expensive. And then that's usually to retaining employees is a lot less expensive than training new ones and hiring and all that other stuff that goes through HR. So talk about, if you would, the reaction, because you work with companies a lot. What is the reaction of the people who are already there who might be considered in that normal range over here? And let's just take one moment and say as an aside, I've always wondered who in the heck is normal? Where is that person? We are all
Sometimes,
judged.
yeah, when I read stats like 20% of people are neurodivergent, I just laugh. I'm like, that's so not true. So I think maybe there's a small amount of people who are actually neurotypical, who are like neuronormative, or are they masking? Are they neurodivergent people who've just learned to mask better? Namely, typically wealthy white men. I'll just say easier to mask and have the power and privilege to do so. So then if most of us are neurodivergent, this is what I find when I speak to companies, to answer your question. I go into companies to talk about neurodiversity or neurodiversity affirming practices, gender affirming practices, the neurodivergent umbrella. 100% of people are identifying with it, resonating with themselves, their children, their grandchildren. They're like, I'm so glad you're talking about this. ERG groups, which are employee resource groups, they have neurodiversity groups, and they're all like, finally, somebody's talking to us about this.
Good.
Everybody's saying that. So now I go to a tech company. I just spoke with a large tech company out in California last night, thousands of people in the audience. Like, the majority of people were saying they were resonating with what I was talking about. And perhaps there's like a tech, connection there where people in tech are already maybe thinking a little bit outside the box and great problem solvers and pattern finders and all. But I agree with you. I think when we expand the neurodivergent umbrella beyond what is typically there, meaning ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and we expand it to what it really is when looking through the lens of neuronormativity, which is, mental health, like bipolar, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, traumatic brain injury, on and on and on. People who are both gifted and disabled, people who are, who meditate for their entire lifetime, they aren't thinking like society's idea of normal either. So this umbrella expands, and all of a sudden, 20%? No way. No way.
Exactly. And probably the very people in the company who say, oh, this might not work, are probably also neurodivergent. I'm glad you mentioned mental health, because I feel the same way about functional versus dysfunctional. I don't know a functional person completely in every layer of their lives. So we can all do with a little therapy. We can all do with a little self-reflection, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to mention that I've been doing this for a long time, just as you have. And 15 years ago, I would talk to people who were trying to get accommodations in the workplace, even just something as simple as being able to wear a headset that they could either listen to white noise or they could listen to something else, so that they were blocking out the conversations on either side of the cubicle, right? And they were getting a lot of pullback and a lot of rejection from their bosses because, well, if we let you do that, then everybody's going to want to do it. And why not? It's not going to hurt anybody to wear headsets.
I love this. So two things. One is accommodations are not privileges nor special treatment. They're just ways so that everybody has an equal, equitable opportunity to thrive at work. Also, an accommodation through the lens of inclusive design is something that everybody can benefit from. You take the ramp, the curb cut ramp that was designed for wheelchair users on curbs. Everybody we know enjoys those when they have a suitcase, a stroller, a walker, when they're temporarily or situationally disabled. So you could say that about almost all accommodations. Headphones, of course there's going to be people who also enjoy, and even if they are neurotypical, the opportunity to tune out noise that's distracting. So it's like solving for one, but serving many.
Got it. Makes perfect sense to me. So let's bring this down to our own personal lives. How do we, you work with companies, but let's face it, neurodivergence and neuronormativity is everywhere in our lives. It doesn't stop or end at the workday. It's 24, well, almost 24/7. I don't know about sleeping, but nonetheless, maybe sleeping too, actually. Um, how do we begin to I was actually thinking about saying, how do we deal with it with other people? But I really want to know, how do we deal with it for ourselves? How do we begin to learn to, I'm going to be really touchy-feely here. How do we learn to love ourselves no matter what? I mean, that's a kind of a big question, but in this kind of area, let's just go there.
You're asking the perfect questions in the perfect order, Linda.
Oh, good.
We talk about fitting in as like becoming who you think you need to
Yeah.
be. Then we talk about belonging, being accepted for our authentic selves. That's
Yeah.
great. But there's another level, which I call neuro belonging, which is what I trademark neuro belonging, and it's my business name. But the reason why I really wanted to create this word is because you're right. It's an inside job. Even if other people don't accept us, even if we don't fit in, even if people don't accept our accommodations, if we stay authentic to ourselves, stand true in our knowing, stand true in our values, our character, our integrity, then we could fit in ourselves and feel belonging anywhere, even if other people don't accept us, because we have that internal sense of who we are, honoring our limitations, our differences, our strengths, our quirks,
Mhm.
and our challenges even. We know we have these challenges 24/7, I would agree. And that we also can stand really strong in that. Now, there's times that we don't fully show our 100% identities. We aren't fully unmasking, fully authentic, because it's not safe sometimes. And sometimes it's just smart to not show everything. But if we can internally understand who we are and love and accept ourselves for who we are, given all of our differences, strengths and challenges included, I think that's the journey. And that's the journey I really love digging into with my
Well,
public.
I love the fact that you used the word journey, because this is not, okay, today I got it. It doesn't just stay in place, because we're not static human beings. We're all fluid, and it's not just about gender, it's about everything that we do. One day I wake up and I'm okay, and the next day I'm not so much okay. I have some clients who they want accommodations in the work. Now I'm just going to talk about the workplace, because let's face it, we accommodate our neurodiversity everywhere. We talk about strategies. I tell people I'm not a tips and tricks kind of coach, because my tips and tricks aren't going to work for you, even though we might be able to work some out for you with you. Then that, but I just also say, you already have strategies, or you wouldn't have made it this far in life. So recognizing what works for you and what doesn't work for you is really important. But also the fact that, oh man, I just lost what I was going to say, because I started thinking about, let me just say, I'll just get this out of my head. Jeff Copper is one of our experts this week, and he has come up with a way of doing some almost engineering based processes that will allow you to figure out what kind of accommodations work specifically for your type of, in this case, ADHD. But many of us have many more other things that are intersecting with that, right? Whether it's a diagnosable something or other, or whether it's just, I feel bad about myself today, right? So I like the fact that these things are very personalized to us. And
Yes.
what I also think is that this is where I was going. I'm finally remembering my thoughts process, is that sometimes my clients don't feel like they deserve to have those accommodations. And that speaks exactly to what you've just been talking about. So what are some first steps that we can take? Listening to this and being with you today is one step. What's the next step we can take when you're not in the room with us?
Yeah. I love that you said that it's not your skills, your tools aren't going to work for everybody, for all ADHD minds. When I talk to people about ADHD management and how to thrive with ADHD, I give them 5 pillars, which are expansive depending on who they are. And those include movement, which any kind of movement, nutrition, connection, medication if they want it, need it, use it, and also systems and tools, but the systems and tools that work for them, right? So I think that there's ways to make it very individualized and customized, because even within the world of ADHD, there's standards and expectations and ideas that won't work for all brains and all minds, because like we're multiply neurodivergent often. So I think having that structure and that framework is good, but then also coming back to that inner sense of self-worth and self-acceptance, and surrounding yourself with people who elevate you, who rise you up, and who remind you. I often forget who I am and forget my worth. I often will feel irrelevant and unlovable. I have a friend who knows me well, who knows that on those days, there's things that she'll say, things that she'll remind me of. And it helps to have it mirrored back, because sometimes we forget, and sometimes we just need to remember what we already know, but we forget because we get bogged down by typically neuronormative standards and expectations, or we step into a space where we thought it'd be safe and then it wasn't, or we step into a space where we thought we could unmask, but when we did, we were rejected or criticized. And then we need to return to the people and co-regulate. I know we talk so much about we have to be financially independent and self-regulate, and yes, and I think co-regulation and having people to regulate ourselves with should be.
Well, that kind of goes back to connection, right? You mentioned that one of those pillars is connection. So
Yes.
certainly all those things are important. And we, let's face it, it's like ho hum back to nutrition and exercise. I mean, but they're really, really important.
Actually, no.
Yeah, exactly. What a concept that they actually help. So let's move on, because I know we don't have too much time left here. Let's move on to if on a particular day, I'm actually able to say, I really kind of accept and love me. I don't just tolerate me. I actually kind of really like me. And I have a right to be in this world just as I am. And we run into someone who disagrees. I was going to say violently, but probably they aren't literally violent, although they can be. Let's face it here, when we read those horror stories in the paper or in the online. How do we deal with that? Because I suspect it is not being so belligerent that we say something like, you have to accept me this way, because that will turn everyone off. So how do we live in a world of bumping into other people?
Yeah, well, that's a hard question. But often if somebody says, oh, you think you're neurodivergent or you're not disabled, they deny, or you're not gender queer, or you're not whatever, because my presentation, my outward shell doesn't match their ideas. Often challenged by these ideas, or challenged by everybody's neurodivergent now. And one of the things that I'll say is, you arguing with my identity or the identities of other people is like an academic exercise. But for us, you are rejecting ourselves and our identities. So it's not up to discussion, my identity, how I identify, neurodivergent, queer, anything. It's not up for discussion.
Right.
And yeah. Does that always shut people down? No, because some people, like you said, are belligerent and they think they know others more than than we know ourselves. So in terms of neurodiversity affirming practices, one of the things I say is, like assume competency and honor people's own lived experience. Like ask and don't make assumptions, and then affirm people's identity. If somebody comes to you and says, I'm ADHD, autistic, and queer, like, even if nothing seems that way to you, just believe, like, just believe.
So
That's how I
if someone, and I don't know that anybody would necessarily come and say that, just kind of, that's the first thing I'm saying to you is that I'm this, but what language, you said words are important. What language would you use to affirm that?
So I'm the person who's being,
I'm listening to, I've just heard you say you're ADHD, autistic, and queer. How do I affirm that? What would
mhm.
I say? What would I say to say? I mean, I'm not going to say good job. What am I going to say?
You could say, one, I believe you. I'm interested in
Okay.
I believe you is good. And
Yeah.
then asking questions. Like, I'm curious how that experience is for you. How
Yeah.
do you identify? How would
Mm,
you like me to identify you? That could be things like gender
right.
pronouns. Uh,
Pronouns. Yeah.
you know, asking and affirming and advocating are really good tools, but it starts with asking and leading with curiosity and leading with humility and leading with a sense that you don't know until they tell you how they identify.
Yeah.
So I start with believe, and then I go to ask and affirm and lived
Okay, cool.
experience, like
Yeah,
honoring.
yeah, yeah. Cool. I love that. I love that. And the word that I jotted down, because I take little notes because I have working memory issues and I forget what I was going to say. Um, the word that I jotted down was reality, is that I create my own reality and you create yours. And that's the piece that I honor. Well, I was going to say I'm not allowed to do this, but I really am not allowed to say you shouldn't be that. You shouldn't feel that way. And that goes way beyond the neurodiversity. It just goes with, well, you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't feel bad about that. Well, but I do. And
Yeah.
therefore, that's my reality. You're not going to talk me out of it. So I know
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit off track here, but I, this is such an important topic. And I
Mhm.
really want people to understand that the bottom line of all this is self-acceptance and self-love. And then, as you mentioned, you said you use these words to be able to stand in your truth
Mhm.
and to be who you are in the world without aggression, without arrogance, but just this is who I am. And it's
Mhm.
and the other piece is I was kind of pushing this direction as in arrogance, that kind of stuff, but it's neither is it apology, right?
Oh, unapologetically,
Yeah,
yes. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. And
Okay.
when you mention reality, of course, we all have our own realities. When I work with couples, one person in the couple, neurodivergent or not, might just say, "I don't feel safe in this relationship." The other person's like, "You're totally safe. I'm safe." But that does not deny the fact that the other person does not feel safe in their
Exactly.
body, in their environment. So we all come in from our lens of all the multiple neurodivergencies or traumas or backgrounds, whatever it is, and our reality is true. It's true for us. And so we have to, whether it's, in a partnership or in any kind of relationship, to honor people's own reality. Absolutely.
I love that. And that's kind of where I was going with the languaging too, was that I really honor that. If someone said to you that I'm ADHD, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so tell us, summarize this for me and for everyone else, because we've covered a lot of ground today. And so what are the most important points that you really want the audience to take away today?
I would love people to take away the sense of their own internal neuro belonging, even if they don't fit in, even if they don't feel accepted everywhere, to walk into a space knowing who you are with integrity, knowing your values, knowing your character, no matter what people give you, the criticisms, the judgments, the actual rejections, the perceived rejections, you know who you are. And I know it's very hard to receive all that input and feedback, and it's going to still hurt and make you feel unsettled and shaky and fragile. Then outside of going into yourself, like allow yourself to go to the people who know you and accept
Mhm.
you and can
Yeah.
reflect back to you and remind you of who you are, because you might in those moments forget, and you might in those moments kind of get swept up and maybe I'm not lovable, maybe I'm not professional enough, maybe I'm not worthy enough, and you'll get stuck in that. And we could talk about RSD another day, but that does happen.
Yeah.
You start to kind of believe other people's narratives, and we believe the lies that other people tell us, and we believe the lies we tell ourselves. And to
Absolutely.
return to that place of worthiness, we have to kind of challenge, like, whose voice am I listening to? Oh, that's my mother from 30 years ago telling me I'm unlovable. Okay, okay, voice, come back to who I know I am.
Sharing.
You can go now.
Exactly, exactly. So I just want to say, I'm so sorry about this phone. I just put this phone in here and I'm so upset that I can't get the ringer to turn off. Anyway, the point is, you can't hear it. Good, good, good. It's distracting me, but that's okay. I just want to say, I may have forgotten it because the phone is distracting me. You mentioned RSD. One of the things that, well, first of all, I just want you to go through your 5 pillars again. Go through those so that we can let people know what those are. One more
Sure.
time.
Movement, and I'm not just talking about exercise, any movement. It could be hula hooping or shaking or whatever. It could be anything.
Okay.
Movement, nutrition in general, systems and tools that work for you and your individual lifestyle, connection, and medication. Did I forget one? Wait, movement, nutrition,
Just did them out of order. Yeah,
medication, systems, and tools.
you got them. You got them. You got them. So I just want to make sure that people heard those again. And remember, the systems piece it includes those strategies and things that you do to try to fit in, if you will. But the thing that I was really getting at and what I was responding to before the dang phone screwed me up here, that was that you mentioned go to people who really respect and know you deeply and really know the real you. They know your reality and they honor your reality. The problem, I think, with some people is that they don't have anyone like that in their life.
Yeah,
And
yeah, sorry.
so, no, that's fine. So I guess what I want to hear is where do we find those people? And I'm suspecting it's support. I don't know. Where do we look for those people and how do we find them?
Yep. I, for myself, let go of almost everyone before 2020. And then I recreated a whole new friends group in a whole new community. And first it was online. It was online interacting with other neurodivergent people, online with other disabled people or other queer people.
Yeah.
Um, and from online, I think there's so much connection that you can create in an online community group coaching, co-working groups, support groups, all the things. And I think because we're all so spread out around the world,
Yes.
I receive a lot of care and connection, even through texting and messaging.
Mhm.
So I know it's not the way it was done before. I know I'd rather see somebody in person at a coffee shop. I'd rather get a phone call. I'd rather get an in-person hug. But on those days where RSD is really bringing me down, those texts or phone calls are life-saving. They're life-saving. And so if you don't already have somebody, I would say reaching out into whether it's a Facebook community or even LinkedIn communities. And even TikTok. I know you gave shade to TikTok in the beginning, but there are many neurodivergent people who are hanging out on TikTok sharing
Yeah,
their stories. And you can
absolutely.
find some resonance in hearing somebody else's struggles and similar challenges. And so I guess I wish the world were more in person, but it's not. And we're a digital world. And so I think leaning into it and taking advantage of the fact that you can connect with people in Australia, you could find your new best friend in Australia who's and has pigs on the farm and whatever you connect in whatever way and lean into it and find people. You don't have to try to make fit your friends and family that don't understand you and don't accept you. It's okay. You don't have to try to continuously like convince them or prove yourself to them or try to fit in with them. You can start a new community.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that because I think a lot of folks with ADHD and other disorders and other neurodiversity sometimes feel so isolated. And you'd think that wouldn't happen with all the things that are happening online. But sometimes even that's scary. So this is really about having the courage to do this. And
Yeah,
and I just want to say that whoever is listening to this and it's identifying with a lot of this, you are absolutely worth it. So you get permission from both Pasha and from me to seek out people who actually believe in you.
absolutely.
We all need that. And before we go, I just want you to say, you've mentioned it a couple times, but you want to define what RSD is so that people know what that is.
Oh, well, it's rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I don't love the name because dysphoria kind of sounds disordered and according to who. But that being said, that's what it stands for. It's
Okay,
a
I just wanted to clear.
highly sensitive and physical emotional pain from
Yeah,
rejection.
exactly. Exactly. All right, cool. Tell people how they can learn more about you and get in touch with you if you would.
Sure. Well, the easiest way is to go either on my website, pashamarlowe.com, or you could find me on LinkedIn, where I live a lot, on at Pasha Marlowe.
Okay.
But if you happen to be on TikTok or Instagram, I'm at Neuroqueer Coach.
Oh, cool. Cool, cool, cool. Thank you so much. It's just been such a joy having you here today. Thank you so much for all this amazing information. And I hope that all of you out there pass this along and we eliminate the stigma of the word queer, frankly, for one, but also to recognize that probably it's maybe 2% of neuronormativity out there and 98% neurodiversity out there. Anyway, all righty. Don't forget, you can send this to anyone. It's free for the next however many hours you have left and take the little clock that we have going on. I invite you, please consider joining us Saturday. Would love to have you. We usually cut off at about 50 or 60 women. And it's not just women. We have everyone there. It's open to everyone. What else did I want to say? Oh, of course, you can always buy the package. You'll get information about that. But in the meantime, thank you, thank you, thank you, Pasha, and thank you all for being here. But stay with us. There's so much more to come. Take care, everyone. Bye now. What a great session.